For more on agricultural production and climate change, Michael Shank joins us now. He's the Director of Engagement of the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and an Adjunct Professor of Sustainable Development at NYU. Good to see you, Michael.
Good to see you, Phil.
You know, I'm a little concerned about this topic because we're going to paint the whole world with the same sort of brush when, yes, I understand we have climate change, but every country has sort of different issues affecting them, right? Whether it's in the US or in Europe or in Argentina, for that matter, South America. But we're going to try. Some people say that the governments have not done enough to adapt. Others might say they're doing the best they can. How do you feel?
Pre-climate change, so thanks for covering this topic. It's a critical topic. It's key to our survival. The food system is precarious already. Even pre-extreme weather, pre-drought, pre-torrential rain, the food system was already precarious, too reliant on exports and imports for many states and countries, as you've already named with Argentina. And then COVID came along and did a doozy to the food system. I think people really realized how fragile the food system is because COVID cut that supply chain in half, and then people were scrambling for food in many cases, certainly in the US. And so I think there's a new awareness of the need for food security, food sovereignty, so that people aren't reliant on exports and imports for their food system and their food, basic human needs, daily food intake. But globally, we've already got 2.3 billion people living in either moderate or severe food insecurity. So if a quarter of the world's population is already living in moderate or severe food insecurity, COVID comes and disrupts it some more, and then climate change comes along and cuts those crop yields by 10 to 30% by 2030, you're going to see those numbers of people living in moderate or severe food insecurity only increase over the coming years unless we do something very different.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, you and I sitting here in an office or behind a desk, it's hard for us to, I guess, empathize with what's happening out there in the rest of the world because there are places that just simply don't have the infrastructure that you and I are accustomed to. Now, that said, is it a logistical issue or is it the fact there isn't enough products or food being grown? Because I've heard from experts that there's plenty of food in the world. We just can't get it from point A to B in a timely manner before the food goes bad.
There is plenty of food in the world. We could feed everyone if we wanted to. Couple options here. We can cut out the middleman. And by the middleman, I'm talking about industrial animal agriculture. Cornell has done a bunch of studies on this where we've already got 75% of soy going to industrial animal ag. We've got 40% of corn, 40% of wheat production going to industrial animal agriculture. And if we took all that food, all that plant protein, all that resource, all that calorie, and fed it to people instead, we could feed another 800 million people with a more efficient food system. So at some point, we're going to be faced with this choice of, well, given how climate change is wreaking havoc on our crop yields year after year, increasingly, how do we do things differently? How do we use plants more efficiently to feed humans? So we definitely have the food. We could feed the world if we wanted to. It does take some political will. The ag industry is very powerful, and so moving them aside to really feed humans first and foremost is going to be the task.
The Farm Bill, without getting into too much technical talk, the Farm Bill, does that address some of the issues that you're speaking of? Will that help not only farms here in the U.S., but perhaps set a model for the rest of the world to see government support for what you're saying, which is to use our resources more efficiently?
Yeah, so if we made that transition that I talked about in terms of taking that soy, that corn, that wheat, directed it to feeding humans instead of industrial animal ag, we would also reduce emissions pretty significantly because beef production, for example, is 150 times the greenhouse gas emissions than the same unit of protein in plants. And so we're reducing emissions in that transition too. One thing that's going to be tough, and the Farm Bill is baby steps towards this goal, which is we need to keep the moisture in the ground and we need to keep the carbon in the ground. And unfortunately, corporate agribusiness relies on pretty extractive tilling techniques, which take the soil, till it, and then as a result, it makes it vulnerable to evaporation. We lose a lot of that moisture that we need to keep in the ground, given these droughts that we're talking about. And we also release carbon. When we aggressively till crops, we release all that carbon, which we need to keep in the ground. We release all that moisture, which we need to keep in the ground. So this shift to more regenerative ag, we're starting to see around the world. And if people want solutions, go to Google and just Google Food
Right.
System Prize by Rockefeller Foundation. I was a judge, and all these innovative ideas are coming up around the world in the regenerative
I think it's frustrating because we seem to know what the answers are.
We do.
We have a hard time implementing. There are a number of NGOs outside. You know, the U.S. Farm Bill is the U.S. Farm Bill. There's a plenty of international organizations that are tasked with implementing or suggesting these ideas for other countries to execute. Can they do more? Should they do more? And how would they do more? Because I still think logistics is a big part of it. Why can't we fix that?
Yeah, so the political will to feed everyone, the political will to make sure everyone has clean water and sanitation, these are very doable solutions. They don't cost much, actually. So the big lift, as you noted, and what I teach at NYU is how do we build the political and public will for this work? Because we have the solutions. And again, I encourage people to Google Food System Prize, Rockefeller Foundation. I was the judge there, and so many incredible, innovative regenerative ag techniques. The solutions that are out there, we just need to scale them up.
All right, really appreciate your work on this, Professor, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.